Hello, this is School Committee Update. Today with Laura Pitone, Ward 5 School Committee member. I'm Sarah Fishman. How you doing, Laura?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm okay. It's been a long time since I've seen you for real, but at least at least some connection here, right? Okay, so when I was preparing for this show, I was struck by how obvious all the questions were that I could ask you. And then I was struck again by how hard I had a time untangling the different parts of those obvious questions. So we might zigzag a little bit. So, but first I want to start with just a little bit about you, just so people know. So how long have you been on the school committee?
January started my 8th year.
Wow.
Hard to imagine.
Yeah. And how long have you lived in Somerville?
So I realized that this fall will be our 20th anniversary of living in Somerville.
Oh, cool.
It just happens, Sarah. It's like first you're the newbie and next thing you're the old timer.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. When I think back to my neighbors, I'm like, oh, I'm the age they were. Or they're yeah. Okay, so how has COVID-19 coping been for your family?
So we've mostly been fortunate that we could do most of us, 3 out of 4 of us were able to work and do school from home. So that made a huge difference. But my oldest, Ethan, who's 19, was working during last spring, and particularly that time when we really didn't know what was going on and there was no mask mandate, and he was working in service. So he was working at Starbucks and then at Target. And that was very stressful. And I have an incredible amount of empathy for anybody who works in service right now. It's really.
So did he get COVID, if I may?
No, he didn't. He didn't. He got exposed at least once, probably more than once. So he had to, come out and we had to isolate him and, wait the 5 to 7 days and then get him tested. But it's just incredibly stressful to always be worried that someone in your family is constantly being exposed. We're fortunate we don't have any health conditions. The good and the bad of my mother and my family living far away is that I'm not seeing them, but of course that's sad.
You're not exposing them.
Yeah, my mother just got her second shot, so that's good. So we're making plans to go visit her. So yeah, I mean, we felt really fortunate. It was very emotionally draining, obviously. As a school committee member, it's been incredibly draining to be exposed to families that have the plethora of experiences, from job concerns, housing, food insecurity, through to families that all are working from home and having to supervise young children, or even those with older high school kids where some of them are really disengaging during remote learning. And that's been incredible. So I'm hearing from all these families and holding that information and trying to do my best to make the best decisions during a devastating time when there's no good decisions to be made. So that I feel thankful that I had the opportunity to hear from people, but obviously there's no way to satisfy the needs. And, I always have to remind myself as this is literally a devastating time. People are losing family members. We can only do the best we can do.
Yeah, it's a public health disaster.
Exactly. And sometimes people forget that. I mean, they don't, but we all get caught up into our individual concerns, they're all 100% valid. Somebody who has a first grader who's at home all day and not engaging online is a huge concern, as well as somebody who's getting exposed because of their job. These are all concerns with different perspectives.
Yeah. So how has Zoom school been for your daughter is in the high school? How?
I have to say, 9th grade is a hard transition. This is my second kid going through 9th grade, and doing it remotely has been not easy. And I feel like what I'm hearing from other people is it's not uncommon. So there's these students in 9th grade who are ready to make this exciting transition, meet new kids, engage in a very different way. The expectations are higher, and to have to do that remotely was really hard.
Yeah.
and continues to be hard. And when you hear your child who, traditionally has been pretty excited about school, or at least tolerated it and enjoyed all the social aspects, not enjoying school at all has been really hard.
It's a bummer.
Yeah. So anyway, I just really have.
Do you think?
Go ahead.
Do you think that she's gotten what she needed academically, or has that also sort of been, I don't know.
It's a good question. I feel like the teachers have been incredibly empathetic. And I really have been impressed with her teachers in terms of how they're trying to engage the students. I just think it's hard for a, newly minted 15-year-old to roll out of bed every day and sit in front of a screen for an entire day and then have to spend a good chunk of her afternoon on the screens doing the work. So
it's like being an adult in an office for an office job that you never applied for.
Yeah, and you were never ready for. Like, this is a kid that's coming from an 8th grade program that was very physically active. Like the kids were out and about and always doing stuff and with the same kids for so long and having those social connections. She has really nice friends and good relationships, but the kids don't, most of the kids that families I've spoken to, the kids don't engage in the way they normally do. They might engage on this.
Yeah, someone told me that what their daughters do is they go on a walk in the morning every day before school. Several of the classmates of the girls.
I think it's an excellent idea. I just have had no luck making that happen in my house. So it's
hard.
It's hard. I'm like I said, I feel like they've done everything they can do in the current environment, and I've been pleasantly surprised at the activities and the things that she's learning and engaging in, because there's so much going on in the world. And many of her teachers are engaging on those topics in her classrooms, which really means a lot to me. That was always something that happened in her middle school as well. She was at the Healy School, and something is going on in the news and my daughter's talking about it. And to me, that's like amazing. So does she learn exactly the other things? I don't know, but is she learning her experience from the pandemic and processing that? Yes. And I feel like sometimes you have to prioritize that, because kids are going to have to deal with what is in front of them in their lives, and having this opportunity to do that in a safe space has been really good.
So what have neighbors or constituents said to you is the hardest about dealing with this? And have you been able to address any of those needs as a school committee?
So some of the hardest stuff, I mean, I obviously only hear from certain people. We don't get, I try to be as open as I can and hear through administration from other families. We obviously have families that have internet access issues and lots of kids in the house trying to access at the same time, and that's been challenging. But I'm also hearing from families where their younger kids are in daycare and have been in daycare since September and are really frustrated at why their kids can't go to school. They say, my kid is in daycare. The expectations for, they're not getting tested and they're using all the protocols and they're doing really well. Why can't we do that in the public schools? And so the younger families is one perspective. And then for the older families, just really feeling like their kids are at this pivotal moment in their lives, particularly seniors, and keeping them engaged. Even though we know in theory, they're more capable of handling, I mean, in general, not every kid, but in general, the students are more capable of handling remote experiences than say a first grader. First grader can handle, whatever it is, a few hours a day. There's a lot of social emotional challenges associated with not connecting with peers. So I feel like my energy mostly had been focused on working with our educational leadership to try to negotiate a contract that would allow for families and students and staff to get back into schools. And that's a lot of the energy that was for fall, and particularly January and February. I'm on the negotiating team, so I was very immersed in that, and trying to kind of come to a middle ground, and that was incredibly challenging. And we finally got somewhere, and the hybrid rolled out, and then the DESE guidance came through. So the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education came through with their guidance that they expected all students K to 8 to be full-time 5 days a week. So there's been a lot of gear shifting.
Yes. So here's where we get to the gnarly part. Which part of this do I ask you about first? Which part do you want to not deal with?
It's all what I'm dealing with, so it's all good.
Complicated. So the last one of these shows was at the end of February. So since the end of February, we've had some kids in Somerville go back. We've had some kids in special programs go into the high school. We've had the ed commissioner say, give this mandate. We've had Somerville ask for a waiver. Somerville has received the waiver. That gives it like 3 more weeks to get everybody in. Okay, so has that process in general been okay? I mean, what was your reaction to the mandate? I guess is the first.
I had mixed emotions about the mandate, primarily because and this is sort of my global view, not just the Somerville view, but through Massachusetts, not all districts have the expectations for building air quality and for testing that Somerville has. So Somerville has really invested, and some people will be critical of this and saying it was maybe too conservative, but really invested in full surveillance testing for all students and staff every single week. And that was a huge investment, as well as bringing up their buildings to a certain air quality standard. So around air exchanges and CO2 levels. And not other districts are doing that. And so that's part of my mixed emotion, is that there was some readiness for Somerville. Obviously it's a little faster than we expected, and it wasn't in alignment with our collective bargaining agreement, or MOA, memorandum of agreement with the union. But we were much more ready than other districts were. But it's still hard. The transition is challenging, and that's the case that the district made for the waiver. They said, look, we understand we have to do this. We have to be compliant. We cannot be responsible for compensatory services, which means, like, if I stay hybrid, then we have to actually, quote, pay back the time in learning, because the remote wouldn't continue to apply. But we also were going from full remote to full time.
That's why my understanding is that's why Somerville had the waiver granted, because it was
so
only to.
And so I think that there were some people in the community that didn't feel great about the waiver, but I think the administration really explained themselves clearly, particularly around the testing expectations. So Somerville, the city is the one expecting the testing. They've put it in their health requirements through the public health department. And so we had to comply with that as well. So we had to comply with what DESE was expecting. We had to look through the commissioner. We had to comply with what the city was saying. And doing that kind of from 0 to 60 wasn't a great idea. And getting administrators, staff comfortable and confident in the protocols is huge. Because the goal is everyone full-time in September, bar any, surge in the virus. Obviously, if there's a big surge in the virus, everything may need to be rethought. But
that's so much more of a cushion to have the summer in there than basically a month, which is what was originally being asked. The commissioner made his announcement on March 5th, and he said K through 6 at least kids in classroom full time by April 5th. So that's a month.
It's like I said, Somerville was more ready than other districts, and so that was part of my mixed emotions. But the other hand is that if the commissioner didn't come down with this guidance, we wouldn't be moving forward with full-time 5 days a week. And there's people in the scientific community that thinks in particular the K-5 should have been there before. So in terms of, the protocols that we're applying were enough to create that really high level of risk mitigation, which I said, other districts don't have. So it's really been challenging to kind of hold.
What's been hard about it? What's been hard?
My background, I have kind of more of a science and engineering background. So I'm all about the data and all about the analysis. The experts had mixed opinions, but there were a lot of experts that felt like students could be back in hybrid at a minimum, if not full time. But I'm also incredibly empathetic to the actual educators and students that have to be in those classrooms and figure out how to do it differently, and feel comfortable and confident that all the risk mitigation measures are going to make them as safe as possible. So you're holding both of those things at once. It's like science is saying one thing, our community is saying something else, and our community is saying a mixture of things, like send them back 5 days. This was in January. We're in a huge surge. There's some people saying send them back 5 days a week. Other people saying there's no way you're going to kill everyone. So there's just been a sort of two ends of the spectrum, and having to hold all of that and doing the best that I can do to honor the science and honor the experience that families and educators are having was challenging. And like the MOA was not ideal. I didn't love every aspect about it, but we had a plan. But like I said, mixed emotions about the Department of Ed coming down and saying, look, you just have to be full-time. And so then we were forced to figure it out. Basically the buildings were a challenge. And
some of them, it wasn't quite so bad, but
no, it's more than they expected. This is the bottom line, is that they thought the work could be done. There was an original plan to come back in December. And then it turned out that wasn't realistic, but that really eroded trust for a lot of people. And I'm not pointing fingers, but it was really challenging. Then we had our administration continuing to make new plans. So let's make a plan for December. Wait, can we do that or can we not do that? Oh no, now we're going to make a plan for January. Now we're going to make a plan for February. Now with the guidance from the Department of Education, this is it. You got to make it happen. And we may or may not hear something about the high school because right now there's no date mandated for a high school return. I don't know if they're going to come down with one, but
why do you think that is? Is it because it's teens who, at least some of whom could be vaccinated, or is it?
I think schedules for high schoolers, as you know, because you've had one, are really complicated. Now, the district worked really hard.
They're switching classrooms, whereas
exactly, there's a lot more opportunity for exposure.
Yeah.
Now, even with the schedule that was created for the hybrid, where there's like you only take half of your classes one week and the other classes, that can help. And I think that was setting us up for a decent place to be. But with the fact that we have at least one of our elementaries offline right now, which is the Winter Hill, our Winter Hill students are in the high school and they're transitioning to hybrid. So that's been really challenging. So that's our Somerville challenge. I can guess what the state is thinking, which is this is complicated. There's different data about older students. They transmit much closer to adults. Their exposures are different. Their development where they are, they have very high social needs. You've seen it. And it would be challenging, but not impossible. But that's my only guess, is that they understand and accept that how challenging that the transition for high schoolers would be.
Then that's a reason to be thoughtful about it. And
but I have to be frank, I'm a little heartbroken for our high schoolers. Like I said, I have the freshman, I'm watching her. She said to me, and she'll probably be mad that I say this, but she said to me, she just turned 15 recently, and she said it was like I was never 14 because it was all of COVID, because I didn't feel anything different in my life. It was like I was frozen for a year, and I thought that's really telling. And we have a whole population of students at our high school that are struggling. But the good news is that we have our CTE seniors back. They've created, I don't know if you've heard about learning labs. So the learning labs are, basically a classroom where students can come in and do remote ed from a more structured classroom with support. So students that were challenged by managing remote ed from like their bed, because to be frank, a lot of kids are just sitting in their bed trying to log on, have a place to go. They get to go in to the building, see other students, see other adults for support, and log in and do the remote learning. So each house has a certain number of seats they're setting up for students so that they'll be able to.
Is it just, so CTE, is that technology? Is it? I'm not clear.
Career technical. It's the career and technical education. So what in the old days we called vocational, but so students.
I was trying not to say that.
I use it as a reference because it is career and technical education, and we're so fortunate because we're a comprehensive high school that has both the academic, the college preparatory, and the career and technical education in the same building. And we have so many students that cross over. We have tons of kids from our career and tech that end up going to college. So it's not like when I was growing up, there were two separate
silos. They're not silos.
And there were certain destinations. We've got kids that are really learning a ton through whether it's the carpentry, electrical, drafting. And so those, particularly the seniors right now, are transitioning back, which is incredibly exciting.
And I have proof of this. I wanted proof. So I know a senior who I was going to be mentoring through a program that got suspended because of COVID. And I said, I was just so excited at the prospect of her being able to get back in the building. So I said, can you send me a picture, a selfie? So she sends me this picture. She must have thought, I don't know what she thought, but she, and she's just at a computer, but she's in the high school. It's clearly a clean, newly carpeted room, and it was just nice to see someone who was high school age in the high school.
Absolutely. It's
Have you been in that building? Have you toured
I took a tour of the building probably about a month ago, and it's stunning. It's absolutely gorgeous. Obviously, that adds to the pain of kids not being back in there, at least high school.
Yeah.
And that's why all, the energy is going around now for me from an advocacy standpoint of, how are we going to guarantee that our Winter Hill school is going to be up and running? How are we going to guarantee that the Brown school is going to be up and running in the fall? And if they're not, making sure we have contingency plans. So our Brown students right now are not in the Brown building. They're in the high school, the modules that were set up outside the high school during construction. But that's where I'm putting my mental and actual energy in it.
Sam told me he liked the modules because at the time it was the only air conditioned or one of the few air conditioned parts of the high school. So I thought, oh no, they're in these yucky modular units, and he was not complaining at all. So I want to shift a little bit. So there was discussion between the school committee and the Somerville Educators Union about returning. And there was a memo of understanding, which I must say I have no understanding of almost. So could you please just explain what that process was?
Yeah, I'll do my best, and I don't want to if I get too weedy, please tell me. So we back in the summer started meeting every week for several hours to discuss a plan for coming back. The first memorandum of agreement, or MOA, was based on remote education. So the point of creating a memorandum of agreement is that there's a change in working conditions. So how the educators are expected to operate and work changes.
So is that a contract issue? So that's by
exactly.
contract.
So anytime you change working conditions, that affects your contract. And so you have to come back and negotiate and make sure that we're representing the educator's point of view as well as administration and the school committee. And so we all come together. So that happened in early fall. And then we worked through the rest of the fall on trying to create one for hybrid learning. And it became really complicated. There was some disagreement, particularly around community thresholds for the level of COVID in the community. So that was one of the topics that really was challenging. So the Somerville Educators Union, or SEU, really felt strongly that they wanted to have clear community indicators. And a lot of the scientific advice that we were receiving was saying they're not necessarily
right.
What you should be making decisions on.
You have to look school by school almost.
In terms of the air, what you're doing to prevent transmission. I mean, the bottom line for all of this is preventing transmission. And so some people felt like, well, community indicators, if there's more community, COVID in the community, then there might be a likelihood of an increased transmission. But they use like an image of Swiss cheese. I don't know if you've ever seen this image, where every protective measure that you put in is a slice of Swiss cheese that tries to protect the virus from accessing people, right? So here's the virus, here's the people, and you put in all these different layers, or like filters. And
still go through the holes.
Exactly. It can still go through the holes, but if you have enough layers, and some of them are finer than others, right? They're more like a filter than a piece of Swiss cheese, like surveillance testing, that can really put you in a place where you're truly mitigating your risk as much as possible. So there was a real challenge around that. And then at some point in December, November, the city came forward and said buildings will be ready in December. So we really were put in a really difficult situation as we were trying to negotiate to open up in December. COVID rates were starting to rise. As we all know, after there's particular holidays, particularly Thanksgiving was a huge point of transmission. COVID rates started to increase in the community. So that was really challenging. And there was a lot of fear, in the community. And so there's one hand, you've got students who families have choice, right? Families can choose to be remote or in person. Educators in theory can't choose. And so that created a lot of struggle and tension. and distrust because we said we were going to open December and then we didn't open December. So January, a lot of energy around, talking to experts and trying to understand and trying to come up with a compromise, a meeting point. So the MOA that came out in January, or no, I think it was early February, was really all about community thresholds. And sort of, we were working really hard at the school committee level to make sure that we were accounting for the quality of the risk mitigation. It's one thing to look at community thresholds, but it's also, you want to look at risk mitigation as well. You want to look at both of them. And that's really what we came to. And then of course, COVID rates started going down. So it was sort of a perfect storm in a good way, is that we were in a place to, that everybody was a little more comfortable moving forward. And then we also created an MOA that finalized the plans for hybrid. And literally the day that we signed it, or maybe 2 days before, the guidance from DESE came. So, we did put all this energy, and I think it was the positive part of it was collaborating with our educators who are, and you were a parent, incredibly creative, talented educators, and kind of building a relationship as best we can moving forward. So as we're planning for the fall, which we may, if everything resolves itself, we may not need any changes in working conditions.
I'm going to stop you on that very optimistic point because we have to close.
Yeah.
This has been School Committee Update with Laura Pitone. Have a great day.